Hard. What is hard? Well, it's defined as something that demands great exertion or effort, but obviously we all knew that already, so I don't even know why I mentioned it. But Souls games are known for their bosses, and those said bosses are known to be super hard. Whether it's their quick and agile nature, a certain attack that can deplete your health bar in less than a second, or just a straight up awful boss with terrible mechanics. At the end of the day, these bosses provide a certain challenge that only masochists, including myself, would enjoy. So with the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC being out for a while now, we've seen what it has to offer when it comes on to challenging bosses. So today or tonight, whenever you're watching this, I'm gonna pick out 15 of the most challenging Soulsborne bosses and rank them amongst each other to see which is truly the hardest. Also, if you love videos like this and you want to see more in the future, hit like and subscribe. Again, if you don't want to do that, then that's completely fine by me. You should also check out my Discord where we talk about Soulsborne content and some other stuff as well. So without wasting any time, let's get to the ranking. Starting off with Fum Knight. Fum Knight is a great boss, but we're not ranking them based on how good they are, but instead on how challenging they happens to be. In Fum Knight's case, he's a hard boss due to his somewhat weird hitbox and aggression. I've mentioned this a long time ago, but I swear you can't heal in front of him without him immediately thrusting his big sword through your gut. Pause. But trying to find the right time to heal got me killed more often than I would like to admit. He also likes to dodge a lot, which can make fighting him with a large weapon a bit of a pain. Now, he's only at the 15th place due to his attacks being somewhat easily telegraphed and the fact that he gives the player a lot of opportunity to land hits, unlike some other bosses that's further on the list. Overall, he's a hard boss within his own game, but again, he isn't as hard as some of the absolute monsters I've yet to mention. Bed of Chaos. Ooh, I hate this boss with a passion. The reason why it's so hard is 1, due to the awful run back that's like 2 to 3 minutes long, 2, the crumbling arena which can make falling off pretty easy, 3, the constant swipe attacks that the boss does every second which can lead you to again fall off below the arena, and 4, the stupid brain dead jump you have to make in the middle of the arena towards the boss. Making the jump is so embarrassingly difficult at times due to how weird the branch is positioned, and what makes it even worse is the fact that you can't even stop for a second to analyze your jumping position because the boss keeps swiping his big goofy ass hands every second, so it's not like you have any breathing room. What's even crazier is the fact that if you do make the jump, the boss can still attack you from inside. All these stuff is the reason why I placed the Bed of Bullshit on the list. Monos. I consider Monos to be the hardest boss in Dark Souls 1, and that's the reason he earns a spot here. Now, Monos is hyper aggressive to the point where it feels like you're playing a whole different game. I mean, most of the bosses apart from Artorias weren't as aggressive as he was. I mean, he has a lot of crazy high damaging combos that gives Soul of Cinder a run for his money. Monos also has different magic attacks that hits like a truck. Now, to be fair, you can deflect those said magic attacks using a special necklace, but it is somewhat hidden, so a lot of people missed it. Another thing that makes the fight more challenging is the fact that it's so dark, making some of his attacks difficult to see. Overall, Monos is a pretty challenging fight, but not as hard compared to the next boss. Nameless King. The Nameless King was considered top 3 hardest Soulsborne boss at one point, but as you can see, him being somewhat low on the list means that there are definitely way more challenging bosses than him at the moment. But don't get it twisted, Nameless is still one of the harder fights in the series, and that's mostly because of 2 things, his aggression and his somewhat delayed attacks. While they aren't as bad as some of the attacks from Elden Ring, the Nameless King has a couple of attacks that can catch you off guard with their delay. He also doesn't give you much time to hit him compared to most other base game Dark Souls 3 bosses. All of that combined with his lightning attacks can make the fight feel really difficult. Now at the 11th spot we have a newcomer, Mesmer the Impaler. Mesmer is a really fun boss. His aesthetics and visual design is great, and his impact on the story of the Land of Shadow is intriguing. He was the one that led the whole crusade throughout the whole Shadowlands, destroying and burning everything to the ground. Now the reason why I mention lore is because you have to be insanely strong in order to lead a great army like that and cause catastrophic amounts of damage. And strong he is because this reflects in his gameplay as well. Mesmer is a really tough boss. In a previous video I mentioned that Mesmer feels like a Devil May Cry boss with the amount of crazy combos he can pull off. And on my first playthrough, those said combos felt insanely hard to dodge, especially since if you get caught in one of them, your health bar will literally disappear in seconds. Now to be fair, I was at like Shadow Tree level 10 or 12, which isn't really the right level to face Mesmer, as level 14 to 16 is the sweet spot spot if you don't want to be too under or over leveled. But even at the right level, those attacks are no joke. His first phase is the hardest in my opinion, as you have to know the right time to attack him, as if you get too greedy, he will instantly attack you with a swipe that sends you flying, which then messes up the whole flow of the fight. His second phase can be a bit easier if you know how to dodge the snakes, but even dodging them can be a bit hard since their attacks are a bit delayed. Plus on top of that, Mesmer does fire damage. All in all, Mesmer is a challenging boss, but he's also very fair and fun, which makes encountering him a good experience. Isen the Sword Saint. The fight was so hard to the point where I had to quit the game for nearly a week straight. What makes Isen so challenging is the fact that he technically has 4 phases, the first one being Genichiro, the second one being him with just his katana, and the third he has a spear, and the final phase is where he can use lightning like Zeus or Thor. But the fact that he has 4 phases isn't the only reason why he's super difficult, but mostly due to his moveset. Isen basically forces the player to use everything they've learned when playing the game and use it against him. He's basically a rhythm battle, and you have to learn his patterns in order to beat him properly. And sure, you can say that about any other boss fight, but Isen is the definition of a rhythmic Souls boss. But what's crazy now is the fact that he has gotten really easy for me. But then again, that's because I used to refight him a lot using the reflections of strength. And speaking of that, why hasn't FromSoft given us that option in Elden Ring? Like, come on, that's gotta be like the most wanted feature. At number 9 we have Rana. Before you say anything, just hear me out. Rana's boss fight might not be as long as Isen's, and it doesn't take a long time to figure out her patterns, but at the same time I find Isen a bit safer, if you know what I mean. You said no? Okay, well hear me out. A lot of Isen's moveset can be easily deflected, which is the main mechanic of, Sekiro. This also makes fighting him feel a bit safer and less open-ended. Rana on the other hand is a very open-ended boss fight, as you have to rely mostly on dodging, and the fact that she has combos that feels almost non-ending can be a bit frustrating due to her having small punish windows. Her attacks also do a lot of damage as well, especially her magic and fire based ones, and let's not forget those catastrophic backshots. She also has a lot of health, and she has a crazy amount of hyper armor and poise. Overall, she's a pretty challenging boss fight, and that's why I placed her over Isen. At number 8 we have the Demon of Hatred. This guy started as one of my least favorite bosses from Sekiro, mostly because I thought he was too hard, so I didn't even try to fight him, which was stupid of me because after I decided to actually fight him head on, he turned out to be one of my favorites. Now the fight itself is still pretty hard, his attacks do a lot of posture damage and his movement is really weird. The attacks where he throws fire rocks at you is still definitely the hardest to dodge in my opinion, but apart from all of that, if you stay super close to him and time the dodges properly, you won't have an issue. But this fight is definitely an endurance run. At number 7 we have Madir. Most dragon bosses in the Souls series are known to be really hard, whether it's Calamite, Ancient Dragon from Dark Souls 2, and Bale from Shadow of the Erdtree, but before Elden Ring there was a boss most would consider at the time to be the most difficult, and that was Dark Eater Madir. Madir is a fantastic boss with great visuals and presence, but at the same time he's insanely difficult. Madir's difficulty mostly comes from the fact that he has an insanely large health pool and he hits like a meteor. What also makes him super hard is the fact that you have to focus on his head in order to do a lot of damage, so you can't hide under him as he will use his inescapable fire breath on you, and on top of that, if you do decide to fight him head on, literally, he barely stays still, so the fight can feel like an endurance test, not only for your character, but for your own mental health as well. At number 6 we have Sister Freda. It might seem a bit strange to place Freda over Madir, but for some reason I had a better time fighting him over Freda. I think the main reason is because while they both share a similar health pool if you include all of Freda's phases, she does way more antics during her boss fight, whether it's her turning invisible, summoning her dad to help her during the fight, and the insane combos she can pull off in her third phase. While Madir remains relatively the same throughout his entire boss fight, only having 2 or 3 new attacks. She's also super nimble and fast, which means she likes to evade most of your attacks. She also has some crazy combos, and in the last phase, her black flames can be an issue to deal with. Also, the main issue I've had when facing her is that by the time you've reached the final phase, you're pretty much low on Estus. Again, in my opinion, she's way harder than Madir. Orphan, of course. Orphan was a boss that I've heard a lot of horror stories about. Before Dark Souls 3, Elden Ring, and Sekiro, he was considered to be the hardest Soulsborne boss, and to be honest, I understand where people are coming from. Now, the strangest thing about my experience with Orphan is that I didn't really struggle with him all that much. Well, kinda. The most I would die to him was like 3 times, but that's it. Now, to be fair, I was using the Ludwig's Holy Blade and the Whirligig Saw, which are 2 of the most powerful weapons in the game, but again, I didn't struggle against him for a long time like most other people. But to be honest, when I say I didn't struggle against him, I'm mostly referring to how long it takes to beat him, but during the boss fight itself, like, oh, trust me, I was struggling. I mean, I was panic dodging, and most of the times we were trading attacks, and every time I've defeated him, it felt like pure luck. You see, Orphan is a little crackhead. He's extremely fast, his attack patterns are very wild and feels random at times. He's also hyper aggressive and he hits like a truck. So even though I haven't spent a lot of time struggling against him like other bosses, I still feel like after defeating him I haven't learned anything and it was just, mostly pure luck. That's why I placed him this high at the number 5th spot. Now we have a boss from the same game, Lawrence. I'm not gonna lie, in my opinion, Lawrence is harder than Orphan. You see, Orphan is aggressive and hard hitting, but fighting him still feels somewhat fair at the same time. Lawrence, on the other hand, is straight up bullshit. He's one of the worst bosses in Bloodborne. His attacks do crazy amounts of damage, even more than Orphan, and in his second phase he loses his legs and lava starts flowing from his ass, which makes the fight even harder since you have to position yourself to his side so that you won't be able to get hit by him. And trust me, he will still find a way to hit you because he does not stop moving at all. Overall, Lawrence is just a terrible boss that happens to be incredibly hard. At the number 3 spot we have Bale. Bale is similar to Madir, where he's a super hard dragon fight with a lot of health, but the difference between both of them is that while it's easier to fight Madir up front, Bale on the other hand is hard to fight whether it's up front or under him. You see, it seems a bit obvious that you have to attack his injured leg lump, but that makes it hard to see what type of attack he's gonna do because sometimes he will just do a sweep and knock you on your ass, and other times he will just pull a midir and blow fire under his crotch. In his second phase, his agility goes all the way up as he barely stays in one spot. He also has his flying beam attack that feels impossible to dodge. And remember, he's a dragon, so all of these attacks does crazy amounts of damage. Overall, Bale is super hard, and I think he earned this spot as probably the 3rd hardest Soulsborne boss in history. At number 2 we have Melenia. Melenia might be one of my favorite bosses in Elden Ring as of recently, but I used to hate her so much due to how overtuned she felt. She has a surprisingly high health pool, not as high as some other bosses like Blasujasax, but it's still pretty high. She can heal every time she attacks you, which is okay, but the fact that she can heal even if you block her attacks felt unnecessary. She also has some awkward hyper armor as well. Sometimes you can stun her, but other times she will just power through the attacks. And let's not forget her infamous waterfowl dance. I'm not gonna yap about this because I've been talking about this one move for the entirety of my channel, but we all know how bad it is. And sure, you can dodge it, but at the same time it feels so unnecessary. She also has some attacks that feels like they can 3-shot you, and in her second phase she's hyper aggressive. Now back to the waterfowl. I know I said I wasn't going to talk about this for too long, but it feels like I have to. The other main issue with the move is that it's hard to tell when she's about to do it, because it feels super random at times. In her first phase it's easier to tell because she usually slows down and starts walking slowly towards you, but in her second phase she can do a regular attack and then immediately goes into the waterfowl stance. Waterfall aside, her clone attack can also be difficult to dodge as well, and let's not forget she can inflict Scarlet Rot on you. All of these are the main reason why she was considered the hardest boss in Souls history up until the next entry. Promised Consort Radahn. Consort Radahn has to be the most bullshit boss in terms of difficulty and balance, but you know what, I'm gonna say my complaints because I've already yapped about him in my Shadow of the Erdtree boss ranking video. I feel like in every Soulsborne entry there's a boss that a lot of people complain about. I remember in Sekiro people were complaining about Demon of Hatred, in Bloodborne it was Lawrence, in the base game of Elden Ring it was Melenia, and now in the DLC it's Radahn. Radahn in the DLC is insanely difficult, to the point where I wouldn't even say he's fair. Now I've beaten him like 3 times now. The first time I used summons, and the second time and third time I've done it without using any. And trust me, even with summons he's still difficult. Now the reason why I say that his difficulty feels a bit unbalanced is mostly due to his large health pool and how blinding the second phase can be. I mean, every time he does an attack, it's followed by an holy beam that can stun you and blind you on what he's about to do next. He also has a holy AoE attack that requires you to start running immediately as he starts levitating, because if you don't run for a millisecond, the blast will catch you. He's the only boss in the entire game that forced me to change up my build, because he feels like one of those modded bosses people created that's just hard for the sake of being hard. But again, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it since I've already done that in the Shadow of the Erdtree ranking video. But yeah, all in all, that was my ranking for the top 15 hardest bosses in Soulsborne history. I hope you guys have a good day and night, and if you love content like this and you want to see more, then hit the like button and subscribe, and if you don't want to do that, then it's cool. Also check out my Discord if you want a place to talk about Soulsborne stuff. The link will be in the description. Anyways, hope you guys have a good one.